Good evening, I'm Samuel Williams and welcome back, where I'll be leading the debate with the Vice President Democracy Creative Industries candidates. I'm joined here this evening with Bryony Newman. Good evening.
Hello.
Cameron Meldrum. Good evening, Cameron.
Hello, lovely to be here.
And Michael Clark. Good evening, Michael.
Hiya.
So, first question for all of you, a nice and easy one. What do you think, Bryony, to you, makes the ideal VP DCI candidate?
I think someone that's passionate about both areas of it, because obviously it is split into two with democracy and creative industries. So someone that is passionate about both of them and can make other people passionate about both of them, I think would be a good quality to have.
And Cameron, same question to you?
I think it's important to be someone who has experience in all the relevant zones in it, and also someone who's friendly, approachable, but also proactive as well. And someone who, because the role's democracy, it's someone who has to be able to take on other people's ideas and from all these different areas and kind of go forward making the best decision. But then, because a lot of people in previous years have come from media departments and creative industries, it's important not to be tribal as well and to make sure you do your job being fair to all the areas under your jurisdiction as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Cameron. And same question to you, Michael.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things is to consider all parts of creative industries in and of itself. It's very important to consider that creative industries has a lot of different parts to it. You've got all of the media departments, you've got performing arts, you've got all of the societies as well. And it's important that none of them as individuals get marginalised nor favoured in any particular way. And also, it's always important to maintain the democracy aspect in order to make sure everyone feels very engaged with SUSU.
Thank you very much, Michael. So, Michael, back to you again. It's a point often raised that funding applications are too complicated within SUSU. What would you do to sort of make that process easier for societies to apply to those?
Well, I've been having a look at some of the policies this year with a particular focus on the society banking system, which at the moment they've got something coming through about perhaps having a SUSU-controlled bank, so that then societies will have less issue being able to hand over accounts. And then funding rounds perhaps then inviting maybe the presidents of each society to be able to come and put forward their views to give their individual society specs, because obviously every society is unique to itself. There's lots of different aspects that cannot be picked up by a general funding round. And so perhaps involving the presidents more directly may result in a bit better funding for everyone.
So, Bryony, back to you. So, funding, is that an area that you're focusing on in your sort of campaign?
Yeah, I wanted to hold maybe like a day where everyone could come in and find out what makes a good funding application, and then have the information available easily online for any societies that didn't make it, or any people who are starting a new society who want to find out how they can get funding and how easy the application really is and what makes a good funding application, because a lot of people know how to do it but don't know what makes a successful application.
Perfect. And Cameron, same question for you?
Well, yeah, a lot of people I've spoken to say that funding applications they find quite confusing, and the guidelines quite hard, difficult to find as well. And like they are available, they're just on the Groups hub in this tiny text. So I think an important thing is actually just make them more visible, and also simplify the guidelines as well. I think a lot of people, when they're running their society, they don't know what they can actually apply for or when they need to start charging membership. If you're applying for something and it's actually something you need every year for the day-to-day running of your society, there's something, it's probably time to look at, starting charging membership to make sure your group is sustainable. And then also, Bank of SUSU has also been mentioned before. That will make funding not only clearer and simpler, but also fairer, because it means that SUSU always knows how much money a certain society has, and it can help them with much quicker and easier with problems in the future. And it also means that, because a lot of the problem at the moment is that SUSU doesn't actually know how much money these societies have. They could have thousands of pounds and not know it, and yet they're still applying for more money. So it's also knowing that money's being allocated fairly and simply, but also knowing that the money is used fairly if they already have it.
Okay, so all of you have said that you're going to simplify the funding measures, but none of you have really covered how exactly you're going to manage that. So how are you going to manage that? To anyone?
Well, as I mentioned about, and as Cameron mentioned as well, about the Bank of SUSU, having it all centralised will be able to make it a lot more clear, and it's very important that you're able to see what each funding both has in terms of what its current funding is, also what it has gotten previously in other funding rounds, because obviously the demands of each individual society will have very different funding rounds. And then the amounts of funding, because obviously, say, sports societies will inevitably require slightly more because of the extent of the sporting kit that then they'll have to replace. but then it will depend on each of the individual zones. And since at the moment the society banking, the Bank of SUSU is still kind of in a kind of very much an alpha environment, so we don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but it would be something that I'd look to develop over the course of my year.
So we've sort of spoken about the sort of the various systems that SUSU has in place, such as, you know, this idea of a bank of SUSU. But do you think that that sort of becomes quite convoluted? Is there an issue with transparency in SUSU?
I think that's what the Bank of SUSU would solve, because at the moment there isn't any transparency. No one knows who has what or who's getting what at the moment. I think the Bank of SUSU would allow everyone to see exactly what's going where and allow all societies to see how much they're being given and, compared to other societies, and then they can know what they can do to get more funding if they need it.
It's also important as well, like you're trying to make funding simpler and clearer as well, but and I think a lot of people mention, it's, too bureaucratic. Some bureaucracy is necessary to make sure the system isn't abused, because if you make it, so easy that, you can have this money, you can have this money, it starts being abused and then the system's not taken seriously.
So you all seem to be, all of agreement that a Bank of SUSU is a good idea. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
And you were sort of talking about transparency, but do you think it should be the case that all societies should have to be able to see other societies' ability to gain funds, etc.?
Well, I think cross transparency between societies can be a good idea, but then not to the point that it would generate any kind of ill feeling between any societies, because particularly so for smaller societies that then only have smaller funding rounds based on their needs or their member base. In the same way that SUSU needs to gain more of an understanding of what each society has, it's not entirely necessary for a society to know exactly what another society needs unless they're in some way collaborating or, say, competing for members over a particular thing.
Some groups also do need different amounts of money as well. Like a sports or a dance society will obviously need more money than, say, a society for a political party, just by the nature of the society as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think if they were to see what other societies have, they should see exactly why they have it, so what the money would be being spent on.
So just moving on to a slightly different point, moving away from funding. As you're no doubt aware, there are changes being made next year as part of the Democracy Review. What are your thoughts on these changes to Cameron?
I think the Democracy Review is a great idea. I think, not just in SUSU, but, in society as a whole, there is a bit of a democratic malaise and people just aren't willing to engage with it. I think the Democracy Review is a good step forward because it makes things easier. In my experience, I've been to Union Council and it has been, just very difficult to get my head around, confusing and highly bureaucratic. From what I've learned, the Democracy Review will make things easier because there's a point of entry. It's like if you want to make a change, it's through You Make Change. That's going to be like the new cornerstone of democracy. And then the people making the decisions are going to be the people who actually care about making the decisions. If it's a performing arts decision, then Creative Industries makes the decision. So these are experts making the decision. But there's also checks in place to ensure that these decision-making powers aren't abused, and that will be in a Senate. That if they thought, well, hang on, there hasn't been enough student consultation done in this decision-making, they'll call a student vote, and all students can have a say in that.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Michael, your opinions on the Democracy Review of SUSU?
I'm strongly in approval of the removal of the Union Council, as some of the points that Cameron brought up, because of the particular processes breaking it up into beliefs and mandates and things, and then it becomes very difficult for people who haven't been to the Union Council before to understand how it works. And it's very important that then anyone can be able to bring forward an issue and then take it to the specific experts who will be able to understand what is going on. And because the removal of bureaucracy is one of the key parts of my manifesto, because it's alienating many students against SUSU. And the important thing is we want SUSU to be the best student union in the eyes of the students, because those are the ones who we want to be able to be engaged. They want to be able to vote in elections and feel like they're making a difference.
Thank you very much, Michael. Bryony, your opinion on the Democracy Review?
I think it's a really good idea. I think it makes it simpler and easier for everyone to get involved and make a change. And I also think the process of it going straight to the zones, obviously then you've got the people who care making the decisions. And as you can track your progress of the idea, I think there's a lot more accountability for if it goes through, if it doesn't, you can know why it did or didn't happen, and there's a lot more transparency in seeing who's making the decisions.
So obviously, Vice President Democracy and Creative Industries, two sort of very similar but also very different roles. Do you think they should be split up into two different sections, Democracy and Creative Industries, rather than being an and?
I do think that, yeah. I was much more passionate about creative industries before I started learning more about democracy. And although there is some overlap, I think they may work better as two different sections. Obviously, each person would need more to do to be able to fulfill the same amount of stuff as one role would, but I do think they should be split.
And Cameron, are you in agreement to that?
I have to admit, democracy and creative industries are two very strange things almost put together like an unhappy marriage. There are some benefits to having them together, like at election time, of course, being the person who's editor-in-chief of the media department, working with them during election time with the democratic processes does have its advantages. But at the same time, they are two, by and large, around most of the year, they are two very strange things put together. So I would be in favour of potentially having them split up and their responsibilities spread out.
So you're sort of talking about the relationship between student media and obviously the democracy side to it. Do they only work together well during election time, Michael, over to you, or do they work together all year round?
Another important part of my manifesto is being able to have plenty of collaboration between media departments. At the moment, that very much hinges on students being part of different media departments, but then also having like cross membership across multiple of them. But then we shouldn't require that. We shouldn't rely on that for that communication to be had. So perhaps then creating more actual formal meetings and interactions between these departments, so then they'll be able to actually communicate the changes that they need to be able to put into effect.
So you all seem to be in agreement that the collaboration between the societies works really well. The democracy and creative industries seem to be a good partnership, apart from the unhappy marriage that Cameron mentioned. But what could we do more for the collaboration between these student departments, media departments, sorry?
Well, I'm in favour of collaboration, but it needs to be collaboration for a reason. I think media departments already do collaborate fairly well together. I mean, you can see it tonight. Surge and SUSU TV are here together. And also, media departments do attend other democratic events. You have West 16 also live blogging union council as well. But when it comes to collaboration, it does need to be collaboration for a reason, because otherwise you're just making people collaborate with no real strategy behind it.
Is this something you agree with, Bryony?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's kind of collaboration for the sake of it. It needs to have an end goal as to why you're doing it. And at the moment I think it's a bit more vague as to why there's certain kinds of collaboration, yeah.
So talking about Cameron, about the potential splitting of the democracy and creative industries, if they were to split, for example, and this is widen this out to all the candidates, which one would you rather represent? Would it be democracy or creative industries?
It's quite difficult. I mean, since I've come to university, of course, my degree has been politics, so democracy's kind of in my blood. But then again, my time at SUSU has been very much part of the creative industries. I mean, I am currently on the committee for Surge Radio, head of social media and marketing. Collaborated with SUSU TV, I've done the odd article with West 16, also done performing arts. It is very difficult, but if I had to choose one, it would probably be creative industries, simply because that's what I enjoy doing in SUSU.
Perfect. And Bryony, same with you. Which one would you rather be representing?
I would rather represent creative industries. That's what I've spent my whole time here doing as part of Union Films, and I've only very recently, in the past year, got into the democracy side of things, so I definitely feel that I'm more knowledgeable about the creative industries side of it, yeah.
And so we've obviously got two representatives here of creative industries. Michael, where are you coming at this from?
I would also take the same stance of being part of creative industries, but then rather than say separating democracy as an overall role, but rather kind of dissolve it among all of the sabbatical officers. Because to me, creative industries is a specific thing that has like very day-to-day uses and changes and events and things that are going on. But as for democracy, that is a kind of overarching thing that takes part over the entire year, as well as during election period. I mean, obviously we had the referendum last semester, which wasn't very well received. And perhaps if everyone would be able to collaborate on that, so all of the sabbatical officers together, because they're a team, they're not just simply each individual candidate operating in isolation. So if it were something that everyone could get involved with, they could also then bring their expertise from their own particular areas to be applicable to SUSU in general.
So we've sort of heard that democracy has been kind of much, maligned. Is it a bit unpopular in SUSU, the actual, even just the title of democracy?
I think at the moment, yeah, mainly because people don't understand what it's about. They know that there is a council and they know that there's democracy within SUSU, but no one really knows how to get involved or how to make a change or what anyone does. I mean, you can find it on the website, so you can look at the minutes, but if there's no one telling you why to do that or why you should be interested in doing it, then no one's going to do it.
So, Michael, same question to you. Is democracy unpopular with the SUSU?
Well, I'd say within SUSU, people are willing to participate, as Cameron mentioned. The media departments will say, come along to Union Council. It's just that there's a very much lack of appeal for students in general who are mostly just trying to get on with their degrees, do their socialising, go to student societies. They don't feel like it may have a very much direct impact on what they want to do. Or if they do go, then it will only have changed, say, in subsequent years, where after they will have graduated, so it will matter less to them.
It's interesting, Michael, you said within SUSU there. Is this a sort of problem that SUSU is quite self-contained? We often hear the term clique thrown around. So going over to Bryony, is that a problem with SUSU at the moment?
I think it can be a problem. A lot of people do think of SUSU as a clique because obviously outside of SUSU, no one really knows what goes on or who's definitely involved. But once you're in, it's definitely a cliquey feel to it. And I think it should be more open. I mean, it is for every student. So I think every student should feel like they can be part of SUSU. And at the moment, they don't.
And Cameron, same question to you. Is there a SUSU clique? Does it exist?
I think I would have to completely disagree with Bryony there. I am actually of the opinion in that there is actually no such thing as a SUSU clique. If you get involved in SUSU and do a lot within SUSU, it's only natural that you're going to make friends with people in SUSU. I have a lot of friends with people in SUSU. SUSU is already very open. I've spent a lot of time in Surge. If you want to have a show on Surge, you are more than welcome to join one of the breakfast shows or the afternoon shows. You're more than welcome to join the DJs group. You're more than welcome to get involved.
It's interesting, Cameron. You sort of talk about your own personal perceptions of the SUSU clique, but sort of how do you think people view it from outside? So, Michael, how do people in the main student body view SUSU and the SUSU clique?
I think in the main body of students, yes, probably are, as I mentioned, a little bit alienated against SUSU as a kind of self-involved unit. But as Cameron said, it's extremely easy to be able to get involved in SUSU. It's just getting people, getting students to want to get involved with SUSU. I mean, obviously, we've now got over 20,000 students here at the university, but then only a very small minority of them will even participate in things in SUSU events. I mean, obviously we have all manner of people involved in the media and performing arts and then on societies, but then if you're not part of any of that, I imagine people don't feel that they have a reason to be involved with the SUSU clique.
Okay, so coming on to sort of our last big debate question now. Coming to you, Bryony, what have you liked and disliked about VP DCI policies over the last few years?
I think one of the ones I really did like was the whole the reform of the democracy and making it easier to make a change and going straight to the zones. That's been one that I thought was a really good policy to, well, obviously not go through yet, but to be mentioned and brought up. And I haven't really seen any negative ones. I know other people will probably think there is, but at the moment I think everything that's been done has been for the better and everything's been a really positive change.
So moving on to Cameron then. So Bryony says nothing negative. Are there any things you've liked, disliked?
One thing in particular that sticks out for me is that there was a policy that said that student volunteers should always have a more precedent over external companies when it comes to like bookings and stuff like that. And I think that's something that is incredibly important. I think, people who give up their time to volunteer for these student groups should always have a bigger voice than external companies. There are, of course, benefits to having external companies, but if a student group or a society wants to have the red brick available, I think they should definitely have it available to them. When it comes to negative stuff, it's not really a policy in particular. However, in my manifesto, it is mentioned that I would like to see the creation of a media committee. In CI at the moment, we have, of course, the CI zone and then a performing arts committee, but there is no media committee. That's been on the cards for years now, and I would finally like to see it properly implemented.
Perfect, thank you, Cameron. And then over to you, Michael. Same question. What have you liked, disliked about policies over the last few years?
Yeah, so as Bryony mentioned, I think that particularly the democracy review is a very good step forward, but obviously we've yet to see those changes actually take effect, because that will take place over the next few months. Then we'll have the AGM in May. We're currently undergoing the performing arts review, but obviously we've yet to see the results of that. But then I would hope that then we can use those policies and actually make some actual change. I also like that that there's a small, in 2014, there was a small like clearing up of some of the other more silly policies. I mean, there was a joke policy that was still technically in effect about the wetness of water, which was then gotten rid of because then it's kind of diminishes SUSU's image in the general kind of student body. And then to me, that's one of the most important things, how students in general, not particularly the ones involved in SUSU, but students overall, how they view SUSU, because then that will obviously affect direct engagement.
So, Michael, you've touched on the performing arts. It's sort of we've heard it mentioned from all the candidates. We haven't really delved into there, and obviously we've got the performing arts review going on at the moment. What sort of changes do we hope that will bring about? How will the role with the performing arts within your sections change over the next few years? Coming to you, Bryony.
One of the things I mentioned in my manifesto was looking at making performing arts a union group. So along with SUSU TV and Surge and Union Films, so they have like more funding opportunities, they have more visibility, and just more space and more chance for people to get involved. That was my main point.
So, Michael, you sort of mentioned performing arts initially, sprung to my mind. But how about you? So, how do you think the role will change for performing arts in the union?
Well, I think the hope is that performing arts will then be able to communicate a lot better with particularly the university and other smaller groups like iSolutions, for example. I know that each individual committee, obviously, as I mentioned, is its own creature, that they exist in their own world because every society has its own individual needs, and that's particularly pundit with performing arts. So I think it's important that the performing arts will be able to maintain their autonomy, but Bryony also brought up the good idea of having a performing arts general committee to be able, so then they can be able to discuss the issues together.
It's interesting. We've mentioned there. Sorry, Cameron, to you, performing arts. Sorry, I apologise.
Thank you very much. I thought you forgot me there. I have spoken to Becky, the current PA officer, and she has said that they would like to see performing arts become a union group because they have so many members. It simply makes sense. Something I'd like to also go on to from that is that currently on the CI Zone committee, they have only one PA rep with regard, as opposed to 4 media reps on the committee. I would like to see, considering that PA have so many members, I would like to see more reps on that committee, maybe a theatre rep, a dance rep, stuff like that, to make sure that there's a fair balance on the zone, to make sure that important things are properly discussed, because Becky actually told me she felt that she was quite outnumbered on that committee zone and that performing arts wasn't getting the proper representation it was deserving.
So, Michael, you sort of mentioned there that different societies sort of very different creatures and animals, etc. Is it true to say that all the societies are very standalone and that there is no sort of collaboration between the different performing arts media groups, except for Bryony?
I don't think so. I think when there's an event or anything, people come together and work together quite easily. I think a lot of people overlap in what societies are in. Just because they're on the committee for one, they'll be a part of another society within the zone. I mean, I'm part of several societies all within creative industries, so I don't think there's an isolation problem with them at all.
Michael, you were the one who sort of prompted me to ask that question. Do you think that there is an issue with sort of societies being too standalone, or certain groups within the democracy, creative industries zone being too insular?
Well, I think I'd like to be able to, for the committees to be able to bring themselves more together, which I saw as Game Society president this year. I was able to look to the other kind of societies where I noticed that our members had kind of cross memberships with other very similar societies. So it'd be good if we could investigate that within all of the creative industries departments. I mean, we can see that that's already there in the media departments, but then we can be able to see, is that happening in performing arts? Is that happening in the other societies within the creative industry zone? I don't believe that collaboration is obviously impossible. I'm just saying that their needs obviously are very different, particularly say between dance and theatrical societies.
So we've sort of spoken about media review and the democracy review. We've spoken about the democracy review this evening, and now we're going to come on to the media review. What sort of changes do you hope that this will bring to SUSU, Cameron?
Well, a lot of people I've spoken to in the media have said that with the media review, they would like to see the creation of a standalone media committee that sits under CI Zone, and these things would focus on, of course, joint socials, because we all have a good social. Also, joint training as well, to make sure that they get the tailored training to them as well. This could be physical training, such as how to use a camera. It could be external companies coming in as well, professional DJs, professional radio producers, and also software training as well, so that perhaps radio DJs can get proper good Adobe Audition training from professionals that have done it. And also, they would like to see I said it before, but just generally more collaboration with that as well.
So, Bryony, same question to you. What sort of changes do you hope will come into effect with the media review?
Yeah, again, I agree with what Cameron said about the media committee, and I also think bringing in people from external companies is a good idea, because not only does it help them training for their role within SUSU now, but I also think for employability in the future, to say that they've got these skills and they learn them from such and such company, and then they can start networking with these people before they've even left university, I think would be a really positive thing.
And then over to you, Michael. Same question about the media review. What sort of changes do you hope it will bring to SUSU?
Yeah, I hope that the students as a whole will then be able to get more engage with the student media groups. Like, for example, at the start of the year, obviously, each individual group, take, for example, SUSU TV or Surge Radio, they all have their main committee meetings, their welcome meetings, kind of staggered throughout the week. But then you can have more like general meetings, etc. as well. I think we have on those at the start of the year to be able to really kind of get people involved, so that then people can be involved right from the start of the year. In particular, making sure that it's very well known to first years who've like first come to the university, and that then they're let know what SUSU has available to them, so that they can get involved straight away. And then this will, of course, hopefully then dissolve the idea of the SUSU clique.
So we're talking a lot about media collaboration here, but how do we avoid, as Cameron mentioned earlier, collaboration for collaboration's sake? So Cameron, over to you.
Well, the easy way to avoid collaboration for collaboration's sake is just not to do it. Of course, it is important to collaborate on important things. Surge and other media departments are currently collaborating on LGBT History Month. That is an incredibly important thing to do. I would like to see more collaboration on things like that. But as I said, collaboration for collaboration's sake, you need to have a direction for it.
Thank you very much. And Michael, very quickly, on the collaboration for collaboration's sake.
Yeah, so it's pretty much as Cameron said. It's very important not to kind of overdo pushing people on collaboration. Essentially, we need to create a forum by which the committees can collaborate more easily, but not force them to do it. Not say, like, okay, in this first half of the semester, what have you done to collaborate with other groups?
Thank you very much. And Bryony, again, very quickly to you. Collaboration for collaboration's sake, how do you avoid it?
I think just ask the committees what they want to collaborate on and just make it their choice. Don't force them to do it, just if they want to, help them to do it.
So, final question now before we hand back over to Serge. Recognition of student volunteers. Are they recognised enough, or are they completely ignored? Cameron?
I think there is always room for more recognition with our volunteers. I would like to see more recognition of publication articles that have done radio shows, SUSU TV programs, and more recognition on the creative industry's Facebook page and Twitter feed, but also on the main SUSU TV Twitter feed and Facebook page as well. That is the biggest medium that SUSU has. I think it's great that we should be able to use that in order to push what our volunteers are making. In my manifesto, it's also mentioned that I'd like to promote the volunteer nature of union films. So in order to do that, I would look at perhaps changing their subtitle so it says your student-run cinema. At the moment, we know it's a cinema for students, but I think it's not always known that it's run by volunteers.
Okay, thank you very much, Cameron. And Michael, same for you. Student volunteers, are they ignored?
I think they're not ignored per se, but then I think overall, particularly having been on committees in the past, it is a somewhat thankless job, particularly for the smaller societies in which don't get recognised. I mean, for example, like this year we've got the Student Radio Awards, which you have every year for Surge Radio, and that's great and that's wonderful, and then people can get involved. But then perhaps if there was some kind of recognition system for people who are giving up their time to be on society committees each year, maybe then it will become more appealing for people to volunteer in the future.
Thank you very much. Bryony, student volunteers, are they ignored?
I think at some point, like on a day-to-day basis, we're kind of ignored as volunteers. I mean, at Union Films, we're often treated as staff and sort of spoken to like that, but I think people need to remember that we're here because we choose to be here. We're not paid to come in and do this, and often that's like forgotten. I know we're recognised in awards and things, but I think, on a day-to-day basis, people need to remember that we are here by choice.
I also think it's important to remember that people don't think of being on committees as a chore. People do them because they generally feel, excited to be working on the committees they're working on. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done them myself.
Okay, thank you very much, Cameron. Well, thank you very much to our candidates. Thank you very much, Bryony, Cameron. Thank you very much, Michael. We're now going to hand back over to Serge for their coverage of tonight's election night.